Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched The Pitt. Oh my goodness, let's talk about it. Guys, real television is back. Real television is back, guys. What can I say? Before I get ahead of myself though, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. As I mentioned in my Daredevil review, I'm playing catch up a little bit, okay, because I've been gone for a few weeks, and naturally the next TV show up on the roster is The Pitt. This is a show that I have been watching over the last few weeks. I joined when they were at episode 10, I think it was, so I didn't have to wait as long for the series to end. Okay, I only had to wait about 5 weeks on the weekly schedule, but even that was a lot. I can only imagine how those of you who have been watching the show from the beginning all the way in January felt waiting week after week after week, especially in the episodes that had those huge cliffhangers, okay, in the second half of the season. I can only imagine how you felt having to wait that long, because by the time that I was all caught up and I had to wait for each of the episodes to drop on a weekly basis, I was like this. I need my weekly dose of The Pitt. Like, what's going on? I barely made it through, okay? But I am so happy to report that even after that traumatic waiting experience, The Pitt ended up being more than worth the wait. And in fact, it emerged as one of the very best, the very best shows to come out of 2025 so far. So today's video isn't really going to be like a review because the season finale dropped a couple of weeks back. So really we're just going to be having a chat. Let's just sit down, get comfy, get cozy, grab yourself a snack, and if you are a fan of this show, hopefully you'll have a fun time just chatting about season 1 of The Pitt with me. Now, first of all, I want to circle back to my earlier statement when I said that TV is back, because TV is in fact back. Like, TV has returned, okay? It's back and better than ever. I mean, first of all, just in general, when it comes to my entertainment experience in 2025 so far, TV has been eclipsing film by a mile, like literally by a long shot. But then specifically when we're talking about The Pitt, another reason why TV is back is because this series is such a great representation of like traditional, good quality, top-notch network television. This is the sort of thing that we used to see a lot of in like the early 2000s, even in the 20-teens era, right? Where we used to have seasons of shows that had anywhere from like 15 to 23 episodes, and they were all consistently good, really tight writing, good use of each and every episode to push an overarching narrative or storyline, but also having like individual stories for each of the episodes that you can kind of sink your teeth into, kind of nibble as like an amuse-bouche, if you will. They also had weekly drops, right? And sometimes they would end with these cliffhangers that would leave you rocking back and forth from withdrawal symptoms as you wait for the next week with the next episode. And then you have, of course, a whole cast of characters that you can get to know a little bit about and fall in love with, and they go through all these twists and turns in their storylines, and that's another thing that keeps you coming back week after week after week. That is the top-notch traditional television that a lot of us got used to pre-streaming era, and I'm so glad to say that The Pitt definitely brings that back into the streaming era in a huge, successful way. This series does feel like one of the last vestiges of the golden era of network television that we used to get in the early 2000s to the 20-teens. And that's no accident when you consider the pedigree of talent behind this series. First up, you have R. Scott Gemmell, who is the writer and showrunner of this series, and he is from ER fame, and he's far from the only person to come out of that show. There's many other ER alumni present here, including the star of the show himself. And And another executive producer on the show, John Wells, also worked on ER, as well as a whole bunch of other incredible, successful TV shows in the past, including Shameless. Yes, Shameless, as well as Made, the incredible Netflix limited series from a few years back that starred Margaret Qualley. So yeah, as you can see, the guys behind the Pitt aren't new to this. They definitely know what it takes to make a good quality TV show, hence why this series just like hit the ground running from day one, or rather hour one. It felt like must-see viewing, and it's no wonder then that the good word of mouth ended up spreading like wildfire. So huge props to the creative team behind the Pitt. This is a very well made show. You can see the production value and quality of the series, and even though it has a relatively simple setup, you never feel bored in the environment, whether it's a set or maybe a hospital that they're actually using. Perhaps it's abandoned or something, I don't know, but you never feel bored of the familiar setting because the tempo is just so fast. Everything is so fast paced. The script is airtight, so you don't feel like there's a lot of, you know, wasted storylines throughout the series. And then you have the brilliant performances by the main cast that create these wonderful characters that we get invested in pretty much from the very first episode. So like I said, an excellent example of good old-fashioned television that managed to capture my attention from start to finish. And in another hallmark move of a classic TV show, this series' popularity has meant that the studio is fast tracking the second season, which is due to come out in January 2026. Yes, we're back to annual releases. Now, in terms of the story of the Pitt, in case you didn't already know somehow, the Pitt takes place in the Pitt, aka the emergency department in a hospital in Pittsburgh. Yes, the name is a double entendre. How fun. But in this hospital, you see a whole bunch of doctors, nurses, and healthcare practitioners running around like headless chickens, trying to treat as many patients as they possibly can in one single day. Yes, this entire season captures the events that takes place in one day, with each of the episodes representing an hour of this 15-hour shift. And that is such a cool setup, I must say. I haven't really seen any other show do this. Apparently it's similar to like 24, but I've never watched 24, so like I don't know anything about that. But to me, this is pretty fresh and novel and very well executed, and it helps to keep up the momentum that I was talking about because the series is so fast paced. When you consider the fact that each episode is capturing 1 hour's worth of work and mayhem and madness, that just kind of builds up that tension and suspense for each of the episodes. It just works really well as a story construct. Now, there are a whole bunch of key characters across the emergency department that we are introduced to throughout the series, but the main guy, okay, at the center of it all is the attending doctor, Dr. Robby, who's portrayed by Noah Weil. And again, he has plenty of experience portraying this kind of character from his work on ER, and so he just kind of slips into this role. He just kind of slips into this role like an old pair of comfy slippers. I said a similar thing about Charlie Cox and Daredevil, and we see a similar thing here. Like, it really does show that practice really does make perfect. Now, despite the fact that, much like Noah Weil himself, Dr. Robby has ample years of experience in his role, and he is clearly so knowledgeable. I mean, he just knows everything about medicine, and he has such confidence as a leader because he is the senior attending doctor, that he's able to lead his whole team of doctors, whether they be student doctors or, you know, other residents, as well as nurses and everyone in his department, as well as dealing with the business side of things, where he gets the visits from that lady that keeps pestering him about that. He has all of this confidence on the surface of the character, but when you dig a little deeper, you see that he really is crumbling under the pressures of being in charge of this high stress department, particularly because on this day that the whole season covers, it happens to be the anniversary of the death of Dr. Robby's mentor, who used to be a senior attendant in the department but ended up dying of COVID. And so Dr. Robby has a lot of PTSD surrounding, the whole pandemic and the whole stress and anxiety and pressures and mayhem of that time practicing medicine, but also of the death of his mentor in particular, who he was very close to and he naturally looked up to. So the fact that it is the anniversary of this traumatic incident and the fact that he felt like he failed his mentor because he wasn't able to save him from this horrible illness means that this is a particularly trying time for Dr. Robby, but he isn't given a chance to fully process everything that's happened because he just has to kind of leap into the position of leadership and help guide all of the doctors and healthcare practitioners beneath him so that they can keep this incredibly busy, high stress department running. Now, I could talk for hours or days or even weeks about some of the narrative points made on this show. But one thing that really stands out to me is this reoccurring theme of Dr. Robby not being allowed to sit with his emotions and fully process the horrible things that are happening around him in the way that he encourages others to do. That's what's really interesting, is that in the early episodes we see some horrible things happen, especially as we have these student doctors come on board to work in the department. This is their very first day and on their very first shift, and they're already exposed to all sorts, including patients that are dying under their care, as is the case for Dr. Whittaker. And when that happens, you have Dr. Robby calling in all of the doctors and encouraging them to take a moment of silence to just kind of pay respect to the patient and also allow the doctors to really sit in that moment in a kind of pensive and respectful, moment of reflection. And in this scene, Dr. Robby says that this is a practice that he tries to encourage amongst his fellow doctors. But as the day goes on and there's more mayhem and chaos happening in the wards, you see that there's less and less time for the doctors to take a moment to really process all of the horrible things going on. And so you feel this kind of pressure and stress and tension building and building and building. You feel it in every single doctor in that hospital, but particularly you feel it in Dr. Robby, who is of course holding on the extra weight of being in charge of the entire department. And particularly on this very troublesome day for him, you see that he's just not able to withstand all of that pressure and all of that stress, and so he ends up buckling. Like, of course he ends up buckling under the weight of that burden, and it's the most heartbreaking, awful thing to witness. And the worst case being, speaking of Dr. Whittaker, when Dr. Whittaker finds him in the children's ward, which has become a makeshift morgue after the shooting at the festival, and he's just like on the ground, kind of knees up to his chest, and he's having a whole panic attack, and Dr. Whittaker finds him on the floor and tries to kind of talk him out of it. It is horrible. It's so sad to see, but it's expected because he was holding on to all of these things and trying to put on a mask of confidence and focus, but alas, he needed to take his own advice and take a moment out, maybe the day off as well if possible, to really process all of the horrible things that have gone on, not just in this shift but also years ago on that fateful day where he lost his mentor. Now, as stressed and traumatized as Dr. Robby is, he's not even the only doctor going through it in that emergency department, because each and every doctor in that department has a story to tell. First off, you have Dr. Heather Collins, my sister, Dr. Heather Collins, who was pregnant at the start of the day and wasn't by the end. Like, truly, she went through so much throughout this single day because she ended up experiencing a miscarriage, which was just so heartbreaking, particularly when you learn that she's been trying to get pregnant for so long through IVF. And on top of that, it's revealed that she used to be in a relationship with Dr. Robby, and she fell pregnant then, but decided not to go through with the pregnancy because it just wasn't the right time and it just didn't feel right to her. So now she's having that extra layer of, you know, like kind of guilt maybe, or just regret over the decision that she made years ago, even though it was the right decision for her at that time. But now kind of going through all of this with the IVF and the disappointments, she's questioning everything. So she actually ends up leaving the hospital earlier on, before the disaster with the shooting, and she ends up taking Dr. Robby's advice, turning off her phone, running herself a nice bath whilst the chaos happens in the hospital. So she is not reachable by the time that they really need her and all of the patients are coming in from the festival. And then next up, you have another senior resident who ends up being a huge gargantuan headache for Dr. Robby, and that is Dr. Langdon. Dr. Langdon! Dr. Langdon. Honestly, I remember watching this storyline playing out and being in denial myself. Like, I was, I was at first, I couldn't quite figure out what Dr. Santos was talking about when she was talking about the meds and all of this. At first, you see Dr. Santos trying to open up one of the bottles of medicine and she can't quite get it open. And she's so frustrated, especially because it's like embarrassing when one of the senior surgeons is there as well. It looks like she's incompetent. And so she goes up to Dana, the head nurse, and she's like, what's going on with these bottles? Like, maybe there needs to be a recall. And I thought she was being dramatic because she's kind of like a quirky character. We'll talk about her in a second. She's a quirky character. So I was like, okay, like, you're gonna blame the whole pharmaceutical industry just because you can't open a bottle of medicine. But then as she starts digging a little bit deeper, seeing some indiscrepancies, it all points to Dr. Langdon. And again, like, because they have that complicated relationship, they kind of butt heads. As many people have pointed out, it's mostly because they're so similar, but they have a difficult relationship, especially considering that she's fresh from the classroom. Like, she is fresh and brand new. This is her first shift at the hospital and she's already stirring things up. Like, it's a problem, but ultimately she ends up being right. And you have that scene, by the lockers in the hallway where Dr. Robby has to give Dr. Langdon an earful and he kicks him out of the hospital because he has been stealing meds because he's an addict. And honestly, like, I don't know what to say. I was like, Dr. Langdon, what? It was crazy. But then it wasn't even over, because unlike Dr. Collins, who's like sitting at home getting some well-deserved rest, Dr. Langdon was, I guess, circling around the block like in his car, and he ends up returning quickly to the hospital once the festival attendees starts coming in to receive treatment. So he's there like seconds, and he's looking a bit too perky. Like, he's looking a bit, something was definitely off with the character. Maybe it was just the adrenaline and the excitement of the situation, but he definitely looked like he was, shifting a bit too quickly. But unfortunately, because they were just so short-staffed in such a horrific time, Dr. Robby kind of had to overlook Dr. Langdon's return and allow him to treat the patients that he could, because they just couldn't afford to lose yet another senior resident. Now, by the end of the season, you do see Dr. Robby and Dr. Langdon have another confrontation where Dr. Robby makes it clear that if he does want to return, if he does want to get that second chance that he's asking for, he's going to have to be subject to random drug testing. Like, he's going to have to go through therapy. It's going to be a whole thing. And I think this was the right thing to do. As Dr. Robby said, he's giving Dr. Langdon a second chance. So you're getting what you wanted. Dr. Langdon wanted him to like bury the whole thing because he's like, oh, it could cost me my medical license or whatever. And Dr. Robby's like, nah, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Like, you deserve to suffer some consequences for what you did. This is huge. Like, this is a huge abuse of your powers, and so yeah, you're gonna need to do something about it, but at the very least you'll still be able to work at the hospital. You just need to be subjected to these tests. And honestly, I think that was very fair of him, extremely fair of him. And I think it's interesting that their relationship turned out this way, because at the beginning of the season you saw how Dr. Langdon was, you know, Dr. Robby's favorite. He was poised to be his successor, and so they had that very like close relationship as professionals and senior people in the department, and Dr. Robby relied on Dr. Langdon and his expertise a lot. And so it was shocking to see Dr. Langdon's fall from grace by the end of the season, particularly as it was highlighted by a complete newbie who was a little bit unpopular because of her spiky personality. And I will say that I think it is intentional that Dr. Robby had such a close relationship with Dr. Langdon, who is another white man. One of the things that this show does really well is kind of wrap up the kind of medical procedural drama aspect with a lot of poignant socio-political messaging. And some of the messaging is very clear, like they're shouting it right from the rooftops, as is the case for the anti-vax movement, and also the shooting that takes place in the festival, which is clearly a call for more gun control. You know, all of these different social issues that affect, you know, Americans in particular are definitely highlighted here in this kind of hospital setting, which, by the way, this series is not the first show to do. We've definitely seen plenty of hospital shows that do a similar thing. In fact, the previous hospital show that I used to be obsessed with, New Amsterdam, famously did this. It famously did this in pretty much every single episode. It was charged with all sorts of socio-political commentary, so this show kind of follows suit in that vein. But I would say the difference with the Pitt is that it doesn't really hit you over the head with the messaging as much as New Amsterdam did, and it also feels a lot more grounded and believable and relatable than New Amsterdam ever did, especially because of the way that medicine is practiced on the show, which is said to be very realistic. I mean, many people have commented on that, how grounded that is, and so that kind of helps ground everything about the show, including some of the character arcs and storylines, and also the socio-political messaging. So the doctors feel less like supernatural superheroes in capes and stethoscopes, and more like actual hardworking, incredibly knowledgeable, world-weary doctors who are sick and tired of seeing these socio-political issues hurt society, and, you know, the patients that they have to treat be hurt by these issues as well. But getting back to Dr. Langdon and Dr. Robby, one of the more kind of under the radar messages that is shown throughout the series is revealing Dr. Robby's internal biases, particularly when it comes to white men or white boys. So the fact that he had that close relationship with Dr. Langdon, and Dr. Langdon ended up kind of disappointing him in a huge way, that was very intentional, and I think it set a precedent for that internal bias that he has, because then we see that be transferred over to that boy, Josh or David or whatever his name was, that teenager who was really depressed because his father had passed away, and he'd become extremely misogynistic and had even written out a list of girls that he wanted to kill or hurt. Yeah, that demon. Dr. Robby was initially really reluctant to act on that threat because he kept thinking about how calling the police would ruin the boy's life. But it was Dr. McKay, a female doctor, who kept insisting that he do something, because he also needed to think about the girls and how they would be impacted if this guy actually acted on his intention. So that storyline was a good example of how the show layered its messaging. Some of the messaging was very clear and screamed from the rooftops. Funnily enough, you know, the whole storyline surrounding David, or whatever his name is, mirrors the storyline of Adolescence, the huge hit Netflix series that solely covered this topic in a lot of depth. But at the same time, with that storyline, you also see the internal biases that Dr. Robby has as a white man in a position of power. Do you see what I mean when I say that I could literally sit here talking about all the different storylines for hours and days and weeks. Like literally this is just the tip of the iceberg, but I've already sat here for far too long, so I kind of need to wrap this up, I'm afraid. But I will quickly go through some of the baby doctors. Oh, first up is Dr. Santos. I already talked about her, you know, difficult relationship with Dr. Langdon, who was supposed to be the resident in charge of her, which is crazy. But on top of that, she also had a pretty abrasive personality. She's extremely cocky. That's the thing about her. She's extremely cocky, overconfident, especially for someone who literally just started 2 seconds ago. Like this is literally her first ever shift, and she just has that cockiness about her. You get the sense that she's worked really hard to get to where she's at. She doesn't come from a position of privilege, but she's just, you know, a really talented young doctor, and she absolutely has what it takes to go the distance, and she knows it, and that's what makes her a little bit abrasive. She definitely does need to humble herself a little bit though, because she's just at the beginning of her career. She still has tons to learn, and she's surrounded by such like talented, experienced, knowledgeable healthcare practitioners, and so acting so cocky and like she knows everything is just going to do her a disservice in this time when she should be humbling herself and learning as much as possible. So even though she does have several wins throughout the day, and also even though she does slowly become a bit more humble and more receptive to feedback and acting on the lessons that she's learned throughout the day, by the end of it she still does need to kind of chill. Like she needs to chill just a little bit, but I think my girl is on the way. Like I think she's on her way to improving. I mean, just after this one single day she made a huge improvement. By the end she even allowed Dr. Whittaker to come live with her after she found out that he's literally homeless. So like sis has done the work. Sis has definitely done the work to improve herself after this one single day. So like I love that for her. And then next up we have Dr. King, aka everyone's new favorite Nepo baby. Yes, apparently she's Bryan Cranston's daughter. That is crazy. That is wild. I'm a huge fan of Dr. King. First thing though, I will say, I think the name is horrible. Her name is awful. Like it sucks. Like they should have named her literally anything else, because of course every time I hear Dr. King it reminds me of the Dr. King, Martin Luther King Jr. So I don't know why they did that, but as it stands that is her name, and I really do love this character. She is actually a second year resident, so she has a lot more experience than Dr. Santos does, but she's also working under Dr. Langdon, and she's neurodivergent, which gives us a different perspective on practicing medicine. You know, how someone who is neurodivergent would tackle you know, practicing medicine, particularly in such a high stress environment. There are times where we see her using her kind of coping mechanisms to ground herself, which is really insightful. And actually some of these things could be helpful for all of the different doctors, not just her. But I think it was a really wonderful character to include in this series, to kind of give us that different perspective, but also because she's a really great character in general. Like she's really likable. I love the fact that she's so compassionate and she's not penalized for it. Oftentimes when you're, especially in like a high stress environment, being compassionate and understanding is kind of like beaten out of you, because you need to be tough and you need to be brutal and whatever. But in the case of Dr. King, it's just ridiculous. In the case of Dr. King, she leads with that compassion, she leads with that understanding, and it makes her a better doctor. You know, she's all the better for it, which I think is wonderful to see celebrated. So that's one of my favorite parts of her as a character. We even got that spotlighted when she had an autistic patient that she helped Dr. Langdon with. Like there were just so many great moments from the character that just made me love her even more. Dr. Whittaker was so adorable. He's a newbie, he's still a student doctor, and he suffered his very first death in this horrible shift, and it broke him. Like it really did shake him up, and for the first part of this terrible day he was really kind of going through it. But then as the day got worse, he almost forgot about it. But a highlight for this character would be the kind of full circle moment of of, you know, Dr. Robby consoling him and encouraging him to just take a moment, take a breather, to really come to terms with what happened to his patient at the beginning. But then we get to the near the end of the day where Dr. Robby has that panic attack, and it's Dr. Whittaker that finds him and does some consoling of his own. So that was a nice, like I say, full circle moment between the two, and I'm really interested to see how that relationship develops between them. Maybe we'll see Dr. Whittaker kind of slide in there as Dr. Robby's new favorite white boy, like because Dr. Langdon flopped so badly, so Dr. Robby's gonna be like, get out of the way, I'm going to make him my protege instead. Season 1 really proved to be an introduction to these characters rather than trying to run through every single aspect of their lives and everything that they're going through. The whole series really did focus on the medicine first and foremost. That is what is really spotlighted on the Pitt, and that's the part, like I said, feels the most grounded, it feels the most realistic, and I think that's what really attracted a lot of viewers to begin with. It doesn't feel fantastical and made up, even though a lot of the words that they're using are completely indecipherable to me as a layperson. But it just feels really real, which is refreshing, because, you know, being a doctor is already so mind-blowingly stressful that, like, you don't even need to add any pomp and circumstance. You could just show it as it is, and it makes for entertaining television. And this is yet another difference that this show has from New Amsterdam, for instance, which never really had that same level of restraint, because it was far more driven by the soap opera character storylines as well as the heavy-handed socio-political messaging than it was by any hard-hitting realistic medicine. So in the meantime, I'm going to be giving season 1 an 8.5 out of 10. So that's it from me, guys. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on the Pitt, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of the series down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch you videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.